Since its introduction to the Western world by H.P. Blavatsky, such ideas as karma and reincarnation, yoga, meditation have become widespread. Themes on these, as well as after-death states and development of superhuman capabilities, have become incorporated in the media, in the movies, in television shows. They have become part of the culture for many. Many fields in science now acknowledge that there is something beyond just the physical world, something beyond what our senses can perceive or what measuring devices can detect. More importantly, there is a growing sense among many that somehow we are all interconnected. However, our world, as we know, is still very much in need. There is so much that remains to be done. In this talk, I would like us to reflect on what it is that our lives are dedicated to. What makes us do what we do each day? What could each of us do for our world? And what could move us to do so? Humans are mostly moved, as we know, by worldly attractions, as well as by fear and the need for self-preservation. In our everyday situations, our decision-making is usually driven by such thoughts as, will this benefit me? What will I get from this? The pandemic has been a good test. Think about our reactions to vaccinations, masking, and distancing. Whether we have been reacting by saying, my body, my choice, or you have no right to endanger me, I have the right to be protected. We will find that most often it is the I, the me, the mine, that largely determines our reactions. We humans tend to cling to worldly life. We chase after pleasures and material possessions, even though they are temporary, and their loss inevitably brings suffering. In a way, we are like Sisyphus in the Greek myth, as illustrated in this image. Sisyphus, as many of you might know, was punished by Zeus for his trickery and was condemned for eternity to push a heavy boulder uphill, only to have it roll back down again, so he could start all over again. One might think how silly it was for Sisyphus to keep doing it. Why didn't he simply stop? As absurd as it might be, the myth is actually a metaphor for the ceaseless and pointless toil that we all spend our lives on. Notice the people sitting on the boulder that Sisyphus is carrying. They represent the opinions, the conditionings, the cravings that we carry around with us and weigh us down. We go along each day, working hard for more money, more security, more advancement, more approval or acceptance, more fame, influence, and power. If all of these are temporary, bound to be lost, and eventually cause unsatisfactoriness, why do we keep seeking them? Why not instead seek that which is permanent? Do we ask why we keep chasing after fleeting pleasures? Consider being on this little boat at sea. We delight in what's around us, the attractions, the excitement, the adventure. But always there is danger lurking somewhere. And were a giant cataclysm to come, we would be left adrift at sea. We could be losing that boat, helplessly tossed around by circumstances. Is this the boat we would like to be on? Inevitably, at some point, all of us will awaken to a dissatisfaction with the transitoriness of worldly pursuits. Then will come a thirst to understand, to be better, to be more than what we ordinarily are. Usually, it is after we experience great loss, failure, severe pain, and suffering, or come face to face with death, that many begin to question. And so a search begins for meaning and for purpose. If you're sitting in this room today, very likely you are already on this search. A little digression for a bit. For the science fiction fans out there, you might recall a story from Star Trek, the motion picture. The story takes place in the distant future. 300 years prior, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, had launched a deep space probe called Voyager 6. It was an unmanned spacecraft designed to collect data and transmit it back to Earth. Well, Voyager 6 somehow got swallowed up by a black hole. It disappeared for a certain period and then emerged sometime later on the far, far side of the galaxy. In its journey, Voyager 6 amassed so much knowledge. It even came to the point of developing self-consciousness. It became a living thing, from artificial intelligence to something almost alive. But although it had achieved all the knowledge available in the universe, it found itself empty. It found itself incomplete, with no meaning. All it had left were questions. Is this all I am? Is there nothing more? And so Voyager felt the imperative to journey back to its creator. For while it had amassed all possible knowledge in the universe, it was still only a super intelligent machine. It knew it needed to evolve. It needed to achieve the human capacity to leap beyond logic, perhaps even to know love. It knew that in order to do that, it had to return to its creator and to unite with it. Does this sound a little bit like our journey? We saw the first boat in an earlier slide. The second boat on this slide is a search and rescue boat. It is powerful. It knows where it's going, and it has control over its direction. It lights its way as well as those of others. It functions with a higher purpose. It exists to serve. The boats are simple metaphors for our human condition. Life would be a bewildering ride were we to be simply tossed around by circumstances, as in the first boat, vulnerable to losing the boat itself and being left at the mercy of circumstances. If our goal is to help a world in need, which boat would we rather be in? The answer, of course, is obvious. To have the power to control our destinies and to lift the lives of others requires the effort to change boats, so to speak. It requires a transformation or regeneration. Before we can help the world in its need, we must make the change, and that change must begin within, in our hearts, in our minds. Only then can we move with understanding and purpose. Otherwise, life will always be one of tragedy and sorrow. What would move us to make the change? What moves you? Fortunately, we can turn to Theosophy for help. Theosophy provides the needed perspective. Unless man knows what he is, what his future must be, in what direction he must move, how can he do the right thing? This was a question posed by our late international president, Mrs. Rada Bernier. Unless we know what we are, what our future must be, in what direction we must move, how can we do the right thing? The recognition of pure theosophy, the philosophy of the rational explanation of things, alone can furnish the beacon light needed to guide humanity on its true path. This is from HPB. Jeffrey Hodson once wrote, "What has Theosophy to offer to mankind at this juncture and in this hour of urgent need?" And he said, the answer is guiding principles. What Theosophy has to offer is guiding principles, the knowledge of which, he said, is all important especially for those who aspire to play an effective part in the present world crisis. What are these guiding principles? Annie Besant said, 3 things you must remember as guiding principles when you deal with social matters. Karma must never be forgotten. Reincarnation must never be forgotten. Brotherhood must never be forgotten. Let us look into these, beginning with the last one, because it is the most basic principle of all, which is why it is the first object of the Theosophical Society, which is to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity. Human brotherhood or sisterhood, or kinship, if you prefer, is not a condition to be created. Have we thought about that? It is not a condition to be created. It is a fact in nature to be recognized, to be acknowledged, and to be ratified in all human relationships. Many traditions have taught that everything came from the same source and share the same life. In Christianity, there is a saying, in him we live and move and have our being. In Hinduism, it is Brahman is all and all in one. Different ways of saying the same thing are present in different traditions. If everything is part of the same whole, then everything affects everything else. And all our actions must be guided accordingly. Recently, in the lessons of the pandemic, as well as the current war in Ukraine, we see how interlinked we all are. What happens in one nation eventually reverberates throughout the world. Our economies, our freedoms, our lives, our health, our happiness are also interlinked. Well, we may not see brotherhood as a fact. It may not be so obvious that we are all interconnected, but deep within the human psyche, there is a knowing that somehow we are all connected. It comes to light particularly when great tragedy strikes and the feeling for another is awakened. In one of the letters of the Mahatma KH, he wrote, the first object of the TS, the Theosophical Society, is philanthropy. How is it similar to the official wording of our first object to form a nucleus of universal brotherhood of humanity? Philanthropy comes from 2 Greek words, as you might assume, philo, meaning love, and anthro, meaning humankind. So we can say philanthropy means a love for humanity. The true Theosophist is a philanthropist, not for himself, but for the world he lives. This is a true expression of universal kinship or brotherhood. The keynote of Theosophy and the cure for all ills is altruism. Altruism is that selfless concern for the welfare of others, even at the cost or risk to ourselves. It means putting others first, not because we are forced to, but because of a sincere desire to help. Altruism gives one a sense of fulfillment. This it is which the Mahatmas, the real founders of the TS, promote as the first object. And as the Mahatma KH wrote, altruism is the only secure foundation for universal morality. If each can be moved with a love for humanity, acts that cause so much suffering can be stamped out. If each can be moved with a sincere desire to help those in need, doubtless the world would be a better place. If our lives are stagnant, it is because there is no flow of interest to others, no communion with the life around us. Our relations with others are partial and largely without life. But if the attitude is one wholly of giving, all problems are bound to cease. When we isolate ourselves, loneliness is inevitable. It is unnatural. It is against our human nature. We need to be with others. And in doing only what's good for ourselves, the happiness we gain will be shallow and fleeting. This is a testament to our connectedness. He who labors for others labors for himself. It is harmonious cooperation that will allow us to advance together to a goal that benefits all. Despite the divisiveness in our world today, we see now and then signs of an increasing consciousness of our interconnectedness. For example, in the recently concluded 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, in spite of the intrigues that marked some of the games, the fireworks during the closing ceremony spelled out a message of hope. The fireworks read, "One world, one family." I quote again from Jeffrey Hodson. He said, "A subtle yet powerful change is taking place in the outlook of mankind upon the planet. This change has been described as a hunger for wholeness. Even now, this unifying tendency is discernible in the world. Signs may be found in a growing intuitiveness and in a capacity to lead by love, sympathy, and comprehension, rather than by the dominance of an imperious will. For to advance humanity, dominance is anathema, while freedom is a veritable religion." The importance of international cooperation has been on display in the world in recent weeks. Notice how many nations have united to condemn Russia for its incursion into a peaceful country, Ukraine. Notice the many efforts taken at diplomacy. The realization of the need to work together to fight aggression is there, that there is strength in unity is also there. We are also seeing a growing planetary outlook in climate change movements. Celebrations of Earth Day, Kindness Day, Day of Tolerance. New technologies are enabling individuals to influence others on a global scale. More and more, we are rising above national boundaries. The evolutionary trend is obviously towards unification, though we are only in the very earliest stages of achieving this. We have spoken of the last of the three guiding principles. Let us now take up the other two, karma and reincarnation. HPB wrote, "Learn well the doctrines of karma and reincarnation, and teach, practice, promulgate that system of life and thought which alone can save the coming races." Note the very important idea that HPB is pointing to. Our use of these guiding principles in our lives alone can assure the future of humanity. Most Theosophists are familiar with these two doctrines. For the sake of those new to these teachings, let's just go through them quickly. Karma is a law of causality that gives back to each one the consequences of his or her own actions. In causality, every act causes a certain effect, and that effect becomes a cause of another effect, and so on. Karma operates continuously, since every thought, word, and deed generates an effect. The effect is always proportionate to the cause that generated it, though the effect may not manifest immediately. The operation of karma can also be modified by later actions. Karma is the law of perfect justice. In the Egyptian teachings, it is believed that at death, a person's heart is weighed against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and justice. If a person had lived a pure life, the heart would be light as a feather. and the soul would enjoy the bliss of the afterlife. On the other hand, if the heart is heavier than the feather, it would be consumed by a monster, the goddess of retribution, representing karma. The natural requirement of our unity is harmony. When that harmony is disturbed, karma acts unerringly to restore the equilibrium. Karma then is the greatest teacher of our oneness. For until we can realize that our actions affect the equilibrium of our shared existence, we will keep suffering the consequences of our actions until we learn the lesson. The existence and operation from life to life of the law of cause and effect alone can restore reason, meaning, and purpose to human life. William Judge referred to karma and reincarnation as the twin doctrines of hope and responsibility. It is only these two doctrines that can explain the mysterious problem of good and evil in the world. They alone provide a rational explanation of the terrible and apparent injustice in life, an explanation of the sufferings and joys we encounter in our day-to-day existence. As the effects of our action may manifest only in a future lifetime, karma is closely intertwined with reincarnation. Reincarnation is a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. With every life, we collect lessons and experiences. Reincarnation reveals a progressive and evolutionary journey then. It gives a logical and inspiring view that perfection is attainable. It is the assured destiny that awaits us all. In Ephesians 4:13, it is described as becoming perfect to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. When we attain to this state, we will have full realization of our shared life and divinity. Only then will there be lasting peace. In the work of regeneration, self-reform is the key. All true reform begins with self-reform. How do we do this? There are two essentials. First, living according to the guiding principles, which means more kindness, less selfishness, more self-restraint, less self-indulgence. The second essential is regular meditation. Well, we might ask, why meditation? Isn't it enough to do good? In meditation, one turns within to seek in the depths of one's consciousness the center which is one's true self. That center is also the one self shared by all. The meaning of the whole universe is contained in that one self. In Theosophy, we have the concept of Atma, the highest principle in each and every one of us, also called our higher self or the universal self. So it is not that each of us have our own Atmas, rather, we all share the same Atma, the same center, the same higher self, the same universal self. The same life throbs in the heart of all beings, in everything in nature and throughout the universe. Unless we are able to recognize this, we will always be subject to the illusion of separateness, which is the cause of selfishness and all the misery and suffering in the world. As stated in the Katha Upanishad, what is within is also without. What is without is also within. He who sees difference between what is within and what is without goes evermore from death to death. In other words, unless we are able to recognize that the one self within us is also everywhere around us, we will always be subject to the illusion of separateness. and all the misery and suffering that we encounter in the world, we will then remain trapped in the cycles of karma as well as life and death. Self-realization, or realization that oneself in all, is what leads to a love for all life. This is the value of meditation. Many meditation approaches have been given by various teachers, and we have to find the method that works best for each one of us. One method used by the Sufis was taught by Rumi and is pictured here. In the image are whirling dervishes. During the ecstatic meditative dance, the dervish revolves from right to left around his own heart, embracing all humanity with love. Since the Sufis believe that the human being was created with love in order to love. The arms are open wide, with the right hand directed towards the sky, representing readiness to receive God's beneficence. The left hand is turned downwards towards the earth, representing the willingness to convey God's spiritual gift. We have said that self-reform is the key if we want to change the world. And living according to the guiding principles, as well as self-realization through meditation, are necessary practices. But, and this is important, to help the world which is in need, change within is not enough. It is only the beginning. One person alone cannot change the world, although it could make a huge difference. It is many people, each doing their share, that will result in a profound transformation. This is because our actions have a synergistic effect, meaning that the effect is not just additive, but exponential. We might see that a simple word or act from one may inspire or change the lives of many. Good works and acts of many will change the world. Thus, Dr. Taimni wrote, the dissemination of the truths of the eternal wisdom is the primary function of the Theosophical Society and a duty incumbent upon all its members throughout the world. Dissemination of the truths of eternal wisdom. These truths have not merely to be brought to the notice of people in every part of the world, but we must find a way for these truths to touch people's hearts so that there is a change in the attitude and ways of looking at things. How do we do this? Again, from Mr. Taimni, we have to win the world, not by any forcible conversion, but by the inherent reasonableness of the ideas and the justice of the principles which we seek to propagate. There is no need to impose the teachings on others. We know well that argumentation does not really help to win friends and influence people. Criticizing others for what they believe in will not change their minds. It only makes them hold more steadfastly to their beliefs. But we must find ways, even if only silently and unobtrusively, to spread the teachings. The aim of the philanthropist, or we might say the aim of the Theosophist, should be the spiritual enlightenment of his or her fellow human beings. HBB once more wrote, Theosophists are of necessity the friends of all movements in the world, whether intellectual or simply practical, for the amelioration of the condition of mankind. She continued, we are the friends of all those who fight against drunkenness, against cruelty to animals, against injustice to women, against corruption in society or in government, although we do not meddle in politics. We are the friends of those who exercise practical charity, who seek to lift a little of the tremendous weight of misery that is crushing the poor. But, she said, in our quality as Theosophists, we cannot engage in any of these great works in particular. As individuals, we could, but as Theosophists, we have a larger, more important, and much more difficult work to do. Close quote. This means that there are many groups already working to feed the poor, fight injustice, etc. But there is one work that only Theosophists can do. Remove the primary causes of various evils first, and deal only in a secondary manner with the effects which flow from these primary causes. There's a proverb that says the same thing. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, meaning it is better to stop something from happening than to repair the damage after it has happened. Wars, for example, generate the greatest amount of sorrow and suffering in the world. Think about Ukraine today. So many lives lost. No matter how many humanitarian organizations are there to alleviate the suffering, they can only do so much. There is a tremendous amount of suffering that can never be addressed. This is why the better way, given our limited resources, is to address the cause of suffering. If we could influence public opinion against the barbarous nature of wars and influence the thought of the world in the direction of pacifism and understanding between nations, then all the suffering could be avoided and a tremendous amount of positive good will be done. The function of Theosophists is to open men's hearts and understandings to charity, justice, and generosity. Around you are acquaintances, friends, associates, in and outside the TS. So the Mahatma KH said, point them to the light, lead them to the path, teach them, be a missionary of love and charity. Thus, in helping others, win your own salvation. To work for mankind is grand. Its recompense stretches beyond this dream of life into other births. So from HBB once more, be Theosophists, be altruists, work for Theosophy. Theosophy first and Theosophy last. For its practical realization alone can save the Western world from that selfish and unbrotherly feeling that now divides race from race, one nation from another. In closing, I would like to return to the original question. What moves us to do what we do every day? Is it just for self? What would move us to transform ourselves and be in a better position to help a world in need? As a Theosophist, what moves you? The universe groans under the weight of karma, and none other than self-sacrificial karma relieves it. And so HBB said, do as the gods, when incarnated, do. Feel yourselves the vehicles of the whole of humanity. Thus the metaphor for the search and rescue boat. Feel yourselves the vehicles of the whole of humanity. Feel mankind as part of yourselves and act accordingly. Doubtless, all of us have felt the fire of longing to be able to do more, but then we get caught up with our daily lives and we drift off to attend to other things. We forget the world, we lose steam. What could be the fuel that can keep the fire burning? What moves us? What moves you? How about the greatest force in the world? Love. A love for humanity, a love for all life. Love will always triumph in the end because it carries the power of our universal nature. We can harness this power. When dealing with a difficult person, surround the person with love, and we will find inevitably things will get better. Why don't we do the same for our world? Surround our world with love. Shanti.